This is the second brush-on mold that I'm making. After brushing on the first layer, all the subsequent layers have some dye in them so that I can see if I've missed any spots. And these key features I make by pouring silicone into little medicine cups and letting it harden and then popping it out. And then I use more silicone to glue it to the outside of the soft silicone part of the mold. And this is what it looks like after brushing on the silicone and adding the key features. This mold is going to get a hard shell that's made in 3 pieces. So this wall of clay is being built just to basically support the parting line where the hard shell will come apart. And this time I'm making the hard shell out of fiberglass instead of polymer clay because it's cheaper, and laying up the fiberglass really didn't take any more time than kneading and mixing all the polymer clay. And this is what it looks like once I'm through with this step, and I can remove the clay. I'm going to use painter's tape to make a parting line like I did with the other molds. One layer gets wrapped around the edge and another layer gets run long, and wedges can be put in between the 2 layers of tape to separate it. I've painted the fiberglass with polyvinyl alcohol, which is basically a release agent that will prevent the fiberglass from sticking to the other fiberglass. So now that I've laid up the other half of the mold, I cut it loose from its base that it accidentally got glued to and cut any excess off of where those key features go. And I also sanded away a lot of the fiberglass splinters. And this is the last bit of clay, the base part. And once the clay is removed, then I can lay up a 3rd piece of fiberglass here. So once again, polyvinyl alcohol will prevent the new fiberglass from sticking to the old, and the 2 layers of painter's tape will make a parting line for separating them. And those white wedges of other clay were a spot to put a screwdriver in if I needed to pry the molds apart, but they weren't really needed. This mold came apart very easily. After separating the 1/2, the base just basically falls off, and then the final piece just pops out pretty easy. So now that I've got my model out and the 3 pieces separate, I can grind off the rest of the glass splinters at the edges. And this will make it a lot safer to handle these pieces of the mold. And this is what it looks like after I've used wing nuts and thumb screws to bolt the 3 pieces of the mold together. And after a test fit with the bolts, I can take the mold apart one more time, and then I'll be able to remove my original model. You can see how nicely these all fit together. And the main reason I'm trying to use this kind of mold is a 1-piece mold can make the entire part without having parting lines or anything to fix in the castings that come out of the mold. So now I can re-invert the silicone and put it back in the hard shell. And this is where those key features come in. I can reach inside and poke that key feature into the little recess in the shell. And because they're wider at the top, they kind of lock in. And they hold the floppy silicone tightly against the rigid outer shell of the mold for rotational casting. So the first step in rotomolding is I pour in the gel coat, and I've got a chip brush that I've cut the handle off of so that I can reach inside the mold after sloshing some gel coat around. And I'm going to use that brush to paint the gel coat into that little ridge where the speaker goes into the speaker shell. Because on the previous one, sometimes that didn't fill in. What looked like little chips in the edge were actually caused by air bubbles that had lodged there and didn't come out when the gel coat was poured in. So after the first layer is done, another second layer of gel coat goes in with milled fibers and some chopped fibers in it to make it a lot stronger. And after removing the wing nuts and the hard shell, this is the moment of truth. This is the first casting made from this mold. It has that little ridge that the original parts coming out of the original mold had, and I had thought that was caused by one of the key features in the mold. And since it's on this one as well, that ridge is in the original model. And I would have to work at making a better model before I make another mold. And I also have these little lumps in here that would have to be ground off for the speaker to be able to fit into this recess here. And what looks like little chips of fiberglass was actually caused by bubbles in the mold. Because I brushed the silicone on with the original model upside down, there were a few air bubbles that were stuck in there, and that's what's making these features that would have to be ground out. I'm just realizing that at this point, and I pick up the mold and start looking at it, and sure enough, if I look closely at that matching spot in the mold, I'm finding these. See, that's an air bubble where silicone didn't fill in, and that's going to make one of those chips or lumps in the part everywhere, and there's a bunch of them. There's another one there. So the two things that aren't working out with this mold is the original model had some lumps in it that I thought were from the first mold, but are not. And this mold has these air bubbles as well. And so if I were to make another mold like this, I would start out with it upside down and brush all of that flange area in with the mold upside down so I don't get any air bubbles in there, and then flip it over and do the rest of it.